Teenager therapy, because we have problems too.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Teenage Therapy. I'm Gael, and welcome back to another episode of hashtag Swiping Safely. In this episode, you're going to be hearing from teenagers that have personally used apps like Grindr, Tinder, Bumble, or have experienced some sort of grooming or predatory behavior. And they're both going to be anonymous because we want to protect their privacy, and they're also very vulnerable, and we want to respect that. So it will be audio only, and you will not know their names. I'm so sorry. You will not know their names, but you will know their ages and their experiences, which I think is more than enough to understand what they're going through. This was a really cool episode, and thank you to both individuals for talking to me. It was really great. It was such a good experience just being able to hear what they had gone through, what they felt, what they regretted, and what they wish they would have done differently. And they both gave some really great advice on what to do and what not to do. So, without further ado, here's the first person. So now we have an 18-year-old from SoCal that is going to be joining us to talk about his experience on Grindr. So B, or like you said, Boba, when did you first start using Grindr?
I started using Grindr when I was 16 years old.
16.
Yeah,
So you were a junior in high school, or were you a senior?
I was in my junior year of high school.
Wow. Why did you start using it?
Um, I think I was starting to get into trying to figure out more about my sexuality, and at the time, there wasn't really a safe place to kind of talk about and initiate kind of conversations surrounding sexuality without being kind of targeted or whatnot. So I was also on a sports team during this time, and I knew a lot of my peers would talk about and like reference the app, and I felt like curious about like the community and stuff. So I was very hesitant and kind of downloaded it, but like didn't really like log into it until like I had some courage. But initially, it was more so like a curiosity of not having been able to find a community. So a community that was like readily available was like Grinder. So it was like let me see what's the community like and whatnot.
Oh wow. It was because your sports team talked about it, right? What sport?
I played volleyball.
Volleyball. And so you had so that's assuming like you had a group of gay friends as well that could relate to you and your experiences.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit more than that though because it was kind of interesting because like since they knew what the app was like, they were kind of more like, oh, like you shouldn't do it though. But like when you tell like a kid not to like get a cookie, like of course they're gonna like try to get the cookie. So like I felt like their like subtle warnings was more like a more satiation for me to like get the app even more to like, oh, like what's so bad about this? Like it's just an app.
Mm. So the more that they talked about not getting it, the more it made you want to get on it and see why they were even saying that in the first place.
Exactly.
Dang. And so w- when you got the app, you said that you were mainly on there to find others like you and stuff like that. Was before this, had you ever had a boyfriend or, you know, had a chance to explore your sexuality?
No, I still haven't had a boyfriend, so lucky that the app hasn't
Okay.
got me anything that way. But um, before this, I think the only like views of sexuality was through like porn and also like movies, like social media. So just like the viewing of what sexuality looked like, but in a very kind of commercialized and um almost like non-reality, so very faux artificial. And I felt like my view of that was very masked by this like production quality and what's it like sexuality and like gay could look like, LGBT communities could look like. So trying to find some more like actual real life communities was a way that I kind of thought I could seek it out through the app.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that you still don't have a boyfriend, which is pretty common. I mean, I think a majority of queer teens don't really get a boyfriend until very late in their lives. Um, when you were younger and like, throughout your high school years specifically, was getting a boyfriend a big priority for you?
Um, I felt like it was it wasn't more so like a priority, but it was more like having someone to like, relate with, to share your own connection with, and be able to like balance off. So like I would get close and you would go through like the talking stage where like you could have someone to like talk about your day with and have like this support quality with. But it was like it never got past that. So I felt like getting a boyfriend wasn't more so like a priority, but it was more like finding someone who you could be like friends, but more than just friends with, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Did you feel lonely because of that? Or was all these people around you enough to kind of keep you from feeling that way?
It's an interesting feeling to say. I feel like lonely is kind of like too deep of a word almost. I want to say like the feeling was more like conclusive and undeserving. I felt like through my tribulations of going through these different relationships with people, whether or not they resolved in a boyfriend, and of course they didn't, but I felt like all of these experiences demonstrated this sense of like undeserving of what I've seen through different like means of social media and medias of sorts.
That's so interesting. So the fact that you did get a chance to talk to people, but they never turned into boyfriends, just made you feel like you weren't good enough?
Yeah, in a way, and I think a big thing that I came to conclusions with was this whole other story and like kind of message behind like intersectionality and like racial preferences, which play a huge role within the community. Because I feel like the big standard stereotypes, and when you go into beauty standards, even like Eurocentric ideals and characteristics are what people kind of gravitate towards. And even more so, like looking at like TikTok communities now, like when you look at LGBT communities and what kind of thrives, it's more of those like white, almost like hetero gendered normatives
Hmm.
that get kind of scoped in and magnified. So anyone who doesn't fit in these different standards are what often get put away or tossed to the side, and it's kind of like hard to fit into
Hmm.
this circle where you're just not meeting the standards.
Yeah, I, I totally agree with that. Do you think that that combined with the fact that you have access to an app like Grindr, eh, does that do you think that makes the app even more dangerous since you're going in there and you're feeling very vulnerable and I guess maybe underappreciated?
Definitely, no, 100%. I think it's taken me a while to recognize this, but like when you're on the app and there's such a variety of people who exist within the app, and say there's people who kind of value what your niche is, so who you are. It's hard because that's instant gratification. So when you get recognized for how you look and how you are, for who you are, it's very like in the moment, and it makes you feel good about yourself. So you're kind of like creating more of that attention. So you get into this loophole of wanting to find more of that. And I feel like looking back now, that was like a very toxic trait that exists. And I think it's definitely a huge struggle to like be in this situation. Like when you're in it, you don't really see the harmful kind of notions that these attention brings for you, but like looking back, you're like, damn, like these people are definitely they know what to say because they know what they want, and often that's more of an
Right.
exploitation tactic.
Right. I mean, yeah, you're coming into the app and you're vulnerable. You're insecure even. So you're in this very fragile state of mind, and suddenly you put your profile, you put your pictures, and when before you went on the app, everyone was saying like no, and you started to feel like you weren't good enough. But you go on the app, and suddenly after making your profile, you're getting tons of taps and lots of messages and people showing interest. So obviously that makes you feel really good about yourself. You start to feel like, maybe they do want me. And like you said, these people are saying the right things. Um they're comforting you, they're validating you. Do you think you felt trapped into listening to that and believing it? And did that ever get to a point where like you trusted someone so much and you later realized they only really wanted to use you?
I think to a certain point, yeah, you start to like trust people. And I know like a big term that is used within the community is like grooming. So in the sense like you kind of nurture in a way to get you to trust people. But it's like it's such an easy tactic when you're doing it on a screen. Like when you have someone to talk to and it's not like physical, you're kind of relying on like what people say. And I think young me definitely trusted people way too much, and I definitely got into like different troubles with it. But I wouldn't say they're regrets or anything because you definitely learn from the experiences and you learn like your hoops around
Hmm.
it. And even if like you mess up once, you're like, like what can I do next to like avoid situations like such? But no, yeah, I feel like in and around like there's such a comfort level when you're really young and naive because you feel like you're being wanted, but in reality, it's like people are saying what you want to hear so they can get a gratification for themselves too.
Hmm. Yeah, I I agree with that, and it's interesting that you say that you don't regret it and you actually learned a lot from it. Do you think that? I mean, how do you feel about that when it comes to these experiences? Because you're glad that you were able to take something away from it, but I guess there's also a sort of a sad reality to that queer teens are forced to live through these traumatic events in order to be aware of the dangers that hide in these apps.
I definitely think it is a sad reality because it's something that you kind of have to like undergo physically and emotionally to come out the other side and be be okay with that. And I feel like I'm lucky enough to say that it's an okay experience because it didn't traumatize me or like it didn't affect me hard. And unfortunately, I know that there are other people who've gone through more extreme situations that have been manipulated, and then they too are they kind of undergo a different experience with that. But I think an even sadder reality is that like s- individuals and young individuals within our community don't have like a more safer space within like physical places like schools and different communities to have conversations about how they're feeling and where to look to. And I know it's like original intent. Like Grinder is not like a it's not meant for like hooking up and stuff, but that's what it's turned to. And it's that can be said for like all these other apps too that are in social media. But I think it's not so having to change the kind of stigmas that the app is, but more so changing the people and the kind of interactions people are making within their choices. Like I know it's like really hard to kind of change what people do, but like I think it all starts with like one mentality.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And moving on from it, I want to go back to when you first downloaded Grindr, when you were 16. What did you find when you came on the app?
There were an array of different things. I know. Um, well, I got banned a bunch of times. Let's just say that. Like a lot of people don't want to catch a case, which for good reason.
Uh,
But
really? Oh, really? That's interesting though. You got banned from the platform
yeah, no. So I know
a couple of times.
there's like a way you can like report people and get their account removed for being underage and all these other things. So being underage is definitely like I think a way that Grindr kind of uses its platform to kind of make sure that people don't abuse the app for like definitely like child molestation and whatnot, all these other things. But
Mm,
um, my first initial kind of introduction within the app is definitely noticing how some people wanted or like were okay with age and people were not. Um,
mm.
so that was a huge thing. I definitely
And and hold on. And so going back to that banned a couple times. So you were banned, but then you were able to make a new account pretty easily, right?
no, yeah, which is interesting. I don't, I should have taken that as a sign of like try again when you're older, but no, I was very committed to the craft at the time. Um, so all I did was like make a new email and we re-signed up. So I guess besides age, I found the other side of it that people were interested. Like I know a huge tribe, I guess, is or like a preference is like older men with younger guys, and that's like
Mm,
it's kind of an alarming tribe, but I guess like age, when you think of it, you can think of it as like underage minors, but there's also like in your 20s, which is described as young. Anyways, um, I guess in my pursuit of like looking for gratification, kind of like surveying the entire people within your community, I feel like looking at that, it's kind of you kind of also pick up on who you thought or what people look like or what people are within the LGBT community. So I guess these were my first instances of cross dressers, which I know I knew they like were a thing because I grew up watching kind of parodies of them like within different shows and such, but like to see them in my own community and on the app was definitely a realization that I had. Um, but also like overall a huge mixture of like what you think because when you think of gay people, you definitely have like a stereotype, and I definitely had a stereotype going on, but it was interesting to see all these different facets of what queer culture, gay culture looks like. And it's definitely not what you think because anybody can be gay and like what they like but have a whole different lifestyle and they don't have to apply to what like social media and what media tells you they look like. So that was a huge realization I had.
Hmm, that's interesting. And did you ever meet up with anyone?
Oh yeah, of course. Definitely met up with people.
What was how long once you got the app did you meet up with someone?
I think it took me almost 6 months before I met with
Oh wow.
anybody. Yeah, it was a little while.
Why did it take you so long?
I think especially being raised in a very conservative household and kind of this reminder of like what's right and what's wrong. Like I feel like I've been in the shelter of believing like your people in your like household are like good people, but people who like are outside are bad. So you never know like people's intentions. But it took me a lot of like trust and courage before I was able to like meet people, and not even like in a sexual way. Like I definitely also met people like just to have coffee and stuff. And those two were different experiences that I kind of appreciate.
Hmm, interesting. So, okay, I want to know all about that. So that first experience, um, why did you decide to meet up with them, and what was it like?
So my very first experience was with this guy who's like visiting town. So he's from like Vegas, I think. And in my mind, like I was like, this is perfect because if the experience goes bad, I never have to see this person again because he doesn't even live here. Um, so
Right.
that was check one. Check two, he was staying at his sister's house, and his sister wasn't home. So it was like, okay, great, nobody's home. Can do your thing and you leave. So that was another great checkpoint for me. Um, and I guess third, we had been talking for a few days, and he seemed like a legitimate guy, like verified Snapchat, everything. And we met up. It was an okay experience. My first experience, I don't know what to say, but let's just say, as someone who wasn't experienced, being with someone who's experienced, it was like a very an okay feeling to be an experience, like
Mm-hmm.
be someone who can help you lead you. And he was like an okay guy. He wasn't super judgy or anything, so I was like, it was an okay experience. Needless to say, I did block him after I
Interesting.
met up.
And how old was he?
He was like 23, I think. It's been a while, so yeah. But he was like
23.
20 in his early 20s.
That's interesting. And did the age bother you at all?
No, I I think I've been around a lot of older people. Like a lot of my cousins are older than I am, so like I guess in that age gap, no matter like how big it is, I felt like I was able to connect with them in some capacities. And then even when I was like in
Mm,
schools, I had a lot of mentors who were older than I am. And it was just more about intention and connection. So like just having someone you can talk to and be able to like just connect in some level, I felt was a way to bridge communities. So in that sense, age didn't really
mm-hmm.
bother me. And I know it is for a lot of people, but in my head it felt normal because it was what I was used to.
That's interesting. It's this is a really interesting point because for a lot of these teenagers, the age gap doesn't bother them at all. They don't see anything wrong with it. They're okay with being 15, 16, hooking up with someone 27, 25, 23. To them, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But usually when you ask them if you're 23, would you be hooking up with a 16-year-old? A lot of them are like, no, I would never do that. So, is that something that you personally would feel comfortable if you were to have been that 23-year-old?
Honestly, no. Honestly, no. And I think a big way I only got away with it was because I kind of lied about my age, which I felt in retrospect, it's kind of like very bad. But I felt like it was something. Ooh, it was something I needed to do for my own experience, like some experience that I needed to have at 16. Um, but
Interesting.
I think, but knowing a lot of like 16-year-olds and like age wise, like people in my own, like there are definitely people who seem like their age and people who don't. So I know not even with just like on Grindr, but like even within my own friend groups and friends that I have who were like in college when I was in high school, they were like, "No, yeah, like you definitely seem old, like you seem mature." So I felt like in that sense, I was able to carry on this like secret life I was having.
Hmm. Interesting. And um I think it's interesting that you felt like you had to do this to like, as a 16-year-old. Are you saying that you had to like you wanted to just have the experience of being able to hook up with someone, or you wanted to be able to hook up with someone older than you specifically?
I think the experience that I thought I needed was just sex in general, but also just like meeting people who I could have a connection with. Because like junior year of high school, you hear all your friends talk about their hookups with like the guy across the room and whatnot, and all these different like social experiences that I felt like I was missing out. And I wasn't like a big person who went to parties either, so I then was just
Hmm.
isolated from all these social events and happenings that other people were having. And it definitely made me feel like I was missing out. I was like feeling a bit of FOMO, but in a more deeper sense of nuance. And
Hmm.
looking back, I felt like I could have waited because they always say like when you have sex with someone who you are closer with, like it's better, and definitely can say that I agree with that statement. So younger should have waited, but there you go.
Hmm. So if there's a piece of advice you'd give is wait until you have someone that you could have a connection with.
Yes, no, yeah. Even just like it doesn't even have to be a super long connection, just someone you like know and like trust with. I feel like a good rule of thumb is like if you could like live with them, they're a good person that you can be with them.
Interesting. I like that. That's good to know. So coming near the end here, so I just would like to know, um, what's the number one thing that you think is what was the worst thing that you experienced on the app?
Hmm. I definitely think communication and lacking of consent. Um, I feel like when you're younger with someone who is older, or even if someone who's like the same age, I feel like if there's like a lot of dominance and over in that relationship, whether it be like just friends or just talking, I feel like coercion is a huge thing that occurs. And I feel like you can be roped into doing things that you wouldn't do. And like as someone who isn't super outspoken, I felt like there have been like different occasions where like I wish I could have said something to prevent things from happening, or like even if just like comfortability, but like when you're in the moment you feel like you have to uphold someone's time because not only is like in my mind it's like you're taking up someone's time, you're taking up their space, but I think now like I feel like it's like your own autonomy. Like at the end of the day, it is your body, and to have sex, like you have to have more than one person. Like you can't just be yourself. So I feel like you have control over what happens no matter what the other person says.
Mm. So there was a moment where you maybe felt regret and you didn't want to participate in whatever sexual activity you were engaging in, but you still felt obligated to simply because you were already there and you didn't want to disappoint them.
Yeah.
Interesting. Um, well, very sorry that happened to you. I think it's important to emphasize that yeah, it is your body and it is your choice. And after all, these are people that you don't owe anything to, right? Yeah, it's something that you agree to and you can opt out of it at any time because it's not something that you owe them and they don't owe you anything. So always make sure to take control of your own body. And the last thing that I want to ask is what advice would you have to someone who is 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 and is on the app or is thinking about getting the app? What piece of advice do you have for them?
I think an advice I would give to anyone of any age who is on the app, wanting to get the app, thinking about it, is kind of like asking what benefits could you get from getting the app? Like, I think looking back at 2020 and 2021 being such rough years, like, I feel like social connections are definitely the way that many people have been opting to, but like, in what capacity do you feel like these connections would garner you? Like, if they're positive or not? Like, I guess, like, at the end of the day, like, what are your intentions of being where you are and wherever you are? Like, if these intentions are something that you would want to do, like, if they're beneficial, I feel like that those are questions that you should be asking yourself. It's not more so like preventing, because I feel like at the end of the day, like it's your own choice and you should be able to do what you want to do, but just really asking yourself, like, are the choices you're making going to be beneficial in the long run? And if that answer is yes, then I feel like proceed with caution and definitely be aware of the different experiences. But otherwise, like, do what you want to do, but do it in a way that make sure that you're safe, and how, especially being aware with how you're feeling in the moment. Like if you're nervous, anxious, like keying into like how you're feeling in the moment is definitely going to be a big saver in how things will interact. And I wish I took that advice, because I felt like if I had listened more to what I was feeling in the moment, whether it be anxiousness or kind of like curiosity, like proceeding with caution and just knowing what you want and how you're feeling is a big advice I would give.
Perfect. That is really true. I agree with everything you said. That was really well said. Thank you. Thank you for joining me, Em. You reached out to us a little bit ago to tell us your story on dating apps. You said that you kind of started this when you were 14. So, Em, how old are you?
Right now, I just turned 18.
Just turned 18. And what has your experience been like through dating apps and hookup apps? Have you used them before?
I have, yes.
What kind of apps did you use?
Uh, I mean, practically everything under the sun. I used Whisper, Kick, Discord, um, Tinder, Her, and a couple others like Zoe and stuff.
Wow. When did you begin?
13, 14 ish.
You were 13 and 14 when you began to use them.
Yeah.
And why did you begin to use them in the first place?
Um, well, the house I come from is very conservative. I grew up going to a Baptist Christian school in the middle of nowhere. Um, so being gay was considered a sin, and I just wanted to feel like I was something to someone, not just this walking, talking sinful burden.
And what do you identify as?
I identify as pansexual.
Pansexual. What was your experience like when you first began to use these apps? What did you encounter when and how did you even come across this?
Yeah, so I just came across it. I was looking at like a Reddit forum of where like gay people meet, or LGBT members in particular, and it led me to Kick and Whisper. And my experiences were just horrible. I'm still recovering from a lot of the things that went down from those apps.
What kind of things happened?
A lot of just very predatory behavior. Um, I would tell these people my age, that I was 14, and they would be in their late 20s and say that they don't care. Um, I would get constant messages asking for nudes or asking for sexual text, etc. And one of the biggest things that took a toll on me was with all these people, every person I met, they had the same, like, you're not actually gay if you don't do this for me, or if you don't say that.
Really, there was a lot of people trying to get you to do stuff as a way to prove that you were part of the community.
Yes.
And how did you respond to all of that?
I mean, I just did it because I felt alone, I felt scared, I wanted to fill this void in my life of not feeling like I was a part of anything. Um, so I would send, you know, nothing on my face. I was smart enough to know that, but very sexual things, videos, pictures, etc.
And these were all people that were much older than you, right?
Yes.
When what was it like when you did send those things? Did they try to ask for more, or did they try to make it lead somewhere more intense?
Um, they would ask for more, and it got to the point where one of the women that was doing this to me, it was nonstop, every day, every minute. Like my phone would just constantly blow up with her, just basically forcing me into sending nudes, into sending videos.
Really? So there was a mix of women and men that you talked to, or was it only women?
It was only women.
And how did you respond to this woman that was constantly blowing up your phone?
I would just, I would tell her, I don't feel comfortable with that. And she was like, then you must not actually be gay. She was like, I think you're just, a straight girl wanting to, experiment. Um, and I would just cry. I mean, I was like, okay, I guess this is what I have to do to prove I'm part of the LGBT community.
And did you do it?
Yes, I did.
And how old was the woman?
She was 19 turning 20.
19, turning 20. And you were what, 14,
Yep,
13?
I was 14.
Wow. And was there at some point, what happened to all the other people you were talking to? Did you just stop talking to them?
She actually, because we were on mostly just like Whisper and Kick, she would message them to be like, don't talk to her. Like, don't, like, that's mine and mine only. She became very, like, predatory and very protective. And those other people were like, this ain't worth it. And I'm hoping they stopped, but I don't know.
Did you ever talk to someone that was your own age?
No.
No? Why not?
I just felt like I couldn't find anyone my own age. Especially, like, I found a couple of, like, gay guy friends, but never, never any other queer women.
So you just weren't able to find them?
Yeah.
Dang. How did you eventually realize of what was going on and that you needed to get off these apps?
Um, just the guilt would take a toll on me. About every time I would get a message from her, I would just have horrific panic attacks. Um, I was self-harming a lot. I hated myself, and I would just look in the mirror and cry because I felt like all I was good for was my body. And once I hit a pretty like a point where I was like, I'm done, and I attempted suicide. I went to therapy, and I was like, I can't take it anymore.
Wow. So these apps drove you to the point of attempting suicide.
Yes.
How were you able to cope with everything?
I just, I think expressing to LGBT youth and mentoring LGBT youth has really helped me a lot. Um, that's been a really big coping mechanism for me, to letting them know and letting them avoid the situation. But also when it comes to my body, kind of how I think it's being just used for that. It's been a lot of work. But I think the best thing I was able to do was surround myself with really cool LGBT friends that I eventually found when I was older, and just getting to know more about me and the things that I love.
Where did you find people your own age?
I found people my own age once I got out of my Christian school. So when I went to public school, I started finding people, but it's still not a lot. It's only a couple people.
Yeah. What do you wish? What kind of resources do you wish you had access to back then?
Oh man. Um, I think having the internet be a little bit more regulated and letting people know the behaviors of that, but also like being LGBT, I wish I had more resources to know that I'm normal, like I'm not, like maybe just people to talk to, people my age that's safe, and I know they're not, you know, grown, would have been nice instead of just finding LGBT people on hookup apps.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think there's a little bit of controversy with these apps, and people aren't sure whether they should ban them for? I guess they are banned for minors, but should you? Do you think dating and hookup apps it should be encouraged that minors stay off of them, or should it be encouraged that if they use them, they try to stay safe and only meet people with that are their own age?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard because I mean, I would just say to people who are wanting to use dating apps, you don't know who's behind the screen. And so make sure 100% that they are real and that they are your age. But I think that comes a little bit older in life, maybe 16, 17. I think there's certain age groups that I'm like, nah, I don't think you should be on it because you don't really know what's going on. And I mean, at 14, 13, you don't really know about relationships yet. You don't really know about sexual encounters. You don't really know about consent, which is super significant. Um, so I would say it really depends on your age, and you know, it depends. Are you willing to take that risk? And just know that my story is just one of the many consequences of if you take that risk.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, thank you, Emily, for sharing your story with me. I'm so sorry that happened to you, and at least I'm glad that you're doing better now and that you got the help that you needed, because that's something a lot of teenagers don't get, and they get stuck in this. And it's also unfortunate that uh, these apps and being on these apps is becoming normalized for some people, and they think it's like a necessary part of being LGBTQ. So thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah,
Mm,
thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure.
of course. That concludes this episode. Had some really great conversations. You got to hear about the experiences of other teenagers. Let me know, what did you get out of this episode? Did anything surprise you? Did you have a similar experience? If you're comfortable with sharing that, please do, because we want to know. We want to know what you've gone through. Um, but thank you again to those two people that joined me. It was an incredible conversation. And yeah, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, do all of that. And please go to our Instagram at Teenager Therapy and reshare all the posts that we're doing this entire Pride Month. It's really important, and we really would love your support. So, without further ado, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.